forgot to turn it on.
Once you've decided that you do want to restore a machine or a record or whatever it may be, then what's the process? Do you map it out in great detail, or do you just sort of amble along and do a little bit at a time and take it as far as you can? So we'd like to explore the planning process as well. And then the resources. A lot of the time you need to access resources. It may be parts, original parts, it may be reproduction parts, it may be advice, it may be services where you have to get somebody to do something for you. So let's use this as an opportunity to learn about the different resources that we can access for doing this. And then finally, the products that you use. There's lots of different products that we use in restoration. Obviously, in cases, it's things like varnishes and lacquers and polishes, metal and wood. There are all kinds of things that are necessary to clean these. Everybody has their pet products. So let's have a look at what people use and see if we can learn from it. So I do hope that this will be a great learning exercise for all of us. We've got 7 people who I'm very grateful to for bringing things along or being prepared to show us their techniques and their processes. And I'll tell you what we've got lined up for you. First of all, we're going to look at a Class M, which Tim McPherson has brought into the room here, and he's going to tell us about his restoration process. Then we have a video from Don Mayer in Victoria, BC. Don is going to be telling us through his video about his restoration of a Pathé Actuel floor model machine. And then we have something completely different, a 1938 Wurlitzer jukebox. So Mike DiCecco is going to tell us about that. And then an interesting one, a little bit different, an Edison horn. You know, so often we see horns that are in a bad state, and this one, Steve's going to show us what he did to bring this Edison horn back to a state of being highly acceptable on any machine in any situation. Then Blaine McCutcheon is going to talk to us about his Edison fireside machines and show us the stages of restoration that he's going through with a couple of machines. And then Sasha Goldman, who's not with us yet, but will be here later, is going to show us his restoration of an RCA 45 RPM record changer. And then finally, depending on time, we'll see, Mark Caruana Dingley has put together 2 US
Talking
machines. And so these are not so much restorations, but actually the building of reproductions, something which Mark is really an expert at. So if we have time, we'll do that, but we'll see as we go on. Yeah. So let's get the ball rolling. If I can invite Tim to come up and take us through. We have some photographs to support this, but he's going to take us through his Edison Class M restoration. So should we bring it
do you have the pictures?
over here?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Do you want me to put the pictures up now?
No, just wait a few minutes till I start.
Tim, shall I bring it over here?
Maybe I should help you. It's very heavy. Keep it flat.
Whoops.
Oh, you're a funny guy.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I'll try not to take too much time. I'll be quick. And I'm not good at this, so bear with me. Just to preface this a little bit first, whenever I do a restoration, I always approach every restoration project differently. I don't do anything the same, basically, from one machine to the other. I look at it, I take it apart, and I decide what it needs, what I have to do to it, what parts have to be replaced, what need to be made, what I have, and so on and so on. But I always keep in the back of my mind, there's a thing I call COPR, C-O-P-R. The machine, I want it done, it's going to be complete, it's going to be as original as possible, I'm going to use period parts when I can get them. And if I have to do any restoration work or get parts made, then that's what I'll have to do, if it's just impossible to get the parts. And some of that happened with this Class M. When I started it, you could start with the pictures now if you want. I got this from France 4 years ago. And when I saw it, and I think when most people saw it, they figured it's good for a few spare parts and that's about it. There's no way that it could ever be restored. But I fell in love with it when I saw it, and I could see through the rust. I could see that it's possible to restore this. So what I did was, by the time it got here, it took a couple of months because the person sending it to me didn't know how to do it, and it went back to it went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth from the shipper to the house. By the time I got it, it had been dropped and broken, and it was wrecked worse than when I bought it. But I still accepted it because I knew I could fix it. What I started with was the cabinet itself. It was smashed and broken and split in lots of different places. And I painstakingly got all the little slivers of wood and scraps of wood and fit everything back into their spots, found out where everything fit, and then carefully squeezed the wood together till I found that it would close up tight. Put the glue in it, closed it up from every angle I could think of, just to get it closed up completely tight. So when the glue dried and I cleaned it off and wiped a little bit of stain on it, it basically made the break almost impossible to see. They're very, very hard to see now. And the bed plate itself was all rust. I don't believe in repainting bed plates. I never do that unless it's absolutely necessary. And this was total rust, so it had to be repainted. So the one thing I couldn't do was sandblast it. I took it to a place that does, where they make those monuments, graveyard monuments. They do sandblasting. So they sandblasted the metalwork for me, cleaned it good, and they use the stuff that doesn't take the metal off, shells or something. So it takes off all the rust, but it doesn't pit the metal.
Walnut shells.
Walnut shells, that's right. So all the marks on here, pitting and holes, is either original or rust holes, one or the other. I didn't fill any of them in because that's not what I'm supposed to do. This is the way it originally is supposed to look. Like I said, I don't know whether the holes are original or rust holes, but I'm not making it look brand new. I'm just fixing it, restoring it. So what I did was, after I got the parts back, the bed plate I took to a special place here in Toronto that specializes in welding cast iron, because cast iron is practically impossible to fix. But this place, they do engines and stuff, train engines and things. So I finally got the bed plate welded back together, and they cleaned it good. And then I found a place that had the proper paint, asphaltum. It's like an asphalt type of, it's the stuff that Edison used. So I painted it with the asphaltum paint. It's a very weird paint. You don't brush it. You lay it on with the brush and you leave it. It's self-leveling. So you lay it on thick. You lay it on, you lay it on, you let it cure for a week because it's 80% solvent. So when the solvent evaporates out, it's flat. So you do that 3-4 times, once a week for a month. Once you have it thick enough and everything looks good and flat, it doesn't need any touching up, then I put they use shellac, but I use lacquer because lacquer will melt the decals, and that's what you want. I sprayed it with clear lacquer, then I put all the decaling back on the way it's supposed to be. That takes a while. And then after the decals were on, I sprayed it with lacquer again to melt the decals. Once the decals are soft and the lacquer dries and hardens, it's one piece. The decals are not separate anymore. They're molded into the finish, so they'll never come off or peel or anything. And the manifold was missing. I had that made. I couldn't make that. And the governor was missing. I had that made too by a fellow in Spain. He did an excellent job. You can't even tell it's not an original governor. And another fellow restored the electric motor for me because I don't know anything about electric. And with the case, after it was all fixed, all I did was clean it and wipe a little golden oak stain on it just to touch up the scratches and stuff. So it's the original finish from, what, 1890s, whatever. And I kept it all original. This front drawer is original, and the knob, this drawer I made. I keep my old cabinet parts. I used 100-year-old wood to make this here, because I saved the old wood because it matches a lot better than the new wood. So I had a little German box, a Kohinoor box, that I used to make this drawer out of, only from a picture. I looked up a picture of it. I could see where the joints were, like which board went underneath one and which went on top and so on. And I made it exactly the same as the picture. And I got a knob from a furniture guy that does repairs antique furniture. This porcelain knob, it's exactly the same as this, and this is the original. So it matches perfect. So I made that. This piece, this round top piece here, and this little top piece here, that I made from a standard, Scorebox standard top board. The top board has the rounded edges. I just cut pieces out of that, and it just fit and worked perfectly for these two small missing pieces. And this side here, it was also missing, and I used the front panel from a Edison concert phonograph, and because it was tall enough. Other boxes, the wood wasn't tall enough. This was just tall enough to fit, and I cut it to fit in there and touched it up and made it match. And that piece there, that's what I replaced that. It works perfect. It runs on 2.5 volts, 3 amps. The motor it weighs about 50 pounds. It's massive. And other than everything was so badly rusted up, it took me like 6 hours just to get these little screws out of the top. Everything was just totally frozen. And I had to have a couple little screws remade. A fellow makes them identical to the originals. These 4 little screws that hold down the reproducer had to be remade. And there might have been another 1 or 2 screws somewhere, I forget now. But that's basically the restoration process. It took me 6 months because it was time consuming for the box and time consuming for the metalwork, getting all the painting and cleaning and getting everything right. So, and it works fine. And that's basically it. That was my 6-month project. But most people would have just scrapped it because of the condition it was in. But I could see through the mess. You know, I see it, and I feel like I'm bringing it back to life. This would have been gone, but I brought it back to life. And now when I'm not here, it's still going to be here. And the person that sold it to me, her father had it in his garage for years and years and years. And she said that told him to throw it out. He wouldn't. He said he was waiting for the right person to come along to restore it. And she sold it to me. He died a couple of years, and then she sold it to me. And I sent her pictures of it. She was so happy to see it fixed. Her father wanted it done. And I did it, and she was very happy to see it.
So we'll go through the photos. That's the top.
Yeah, that's, you can see how everything is rusted. There's very little paint there. All the metalwork is corroded. Everything there is corroded. That's I had to clean that down to bare brass and have it re-nickeled. And that worm gear, I thought it was going to be total crap, but I got an edge of a X-Acto knife and run it and scrape that through the grooves, and it actually cleaned enough dirt out that the gear was okay. Yeah, it's another plate there needed to be, and that's the electric motor inside. You see how big it is. Yeah, just everything is all frozen, rusted and frozen. Nothing would move. That's why I said most people would have just scrapped it, take the good parts off of it, and sell them or something, but they would never go to this much work to fix it. But I just couldn't let it go. I had to do it. Something inside me told me I got to do it.
How did you find the person who had it?
I found her on eBay, actually.
Oh, wow.
eBay France. Yeah, that's where it got broken in half. Yeah, everything's being held together. It's all shattered and splintered, and you can see it just looks like garbage, but
That break there, Tim, in the bed plate,
yeah.
just go back, so that's a bit completely broken off. Oh, it's underneath the bed plate, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the top part there. The top workings is bolted onto that piece of bed plate.
Yeah, so we can't, with the machine in that situation, we can't see that bit underneath.
Yeah, that's this plate here.
It's right here. See, that's this part under here. It's underneath the wood.
Oh, right. Oh, I see, yeah.
Yeah, it's this piece under here.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, but that place that fixed it, they do wonders with a cast iron because it's usually not fixable.
Right.
This is the inside.
Yeah, as you can see, like there are places that were shattered and pushed in, and I just fit all these little slivers back together, and it was just a lot of work, but it was worth it to me. I really wanted to bring this back to life. I couldn't leave it. Okay, I guess that's about. Anybody want to know anything?
You mentioned a fellow in Spain making the governor part. How did you find someone to make the governor or?
Well, there's just I don't know exactly how I found that Pedro in Spain, unless
He's on
Darren
Facebook.
might have told me about him. You know, Darren the machinist.
Oh yes.
He might have told me about Pedro, and I had him fix a couple things for me in the past, and he had one, so he just made a sand casting and cast it out of brass, or bronze or brass, and then cleaned it all up, and he turned out all the little pieces on a lathe, and he made all the little bits and pieces, put it together, and I painted it with the asphaltum, and it looks perfect.
It looks original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tim?
Yes.
Because of my, you may not want to answer this question. I can't imagine the number of hours. You probably never kept track of it because it would be unbelievable. Cost-wise, not necessarily the machine, do you have any idea what you got into the machine
Yeah.
through the restoration? Did you keep sort of track or? maybe
Yeah,
you
I
don't
kept
wanna
track of
share?
everything I spent on it. Yeah, the original machine I paid $6,000 for, even in that condition.
Oh, yeah, I believe that.
There was a lot of people bidding on it. And then by the time I bought the three parts, the governor, the manifold, and the reproducer, this is an original. This reproducer has the cutter and the stylus on the same reproducer. It's called a standard. It was the first one that came out in 1890. That was, so you just turn it a quarter turn, and you can record, and then turn it back a quarter turn, and you can play the record. They were the very first ones that Edison put on them. And and I spent altogether, about another $7,000 on restoring it. So I got $13,000 into it, but you know what these things are worth?
Miller & Miller, the last one they sold was $30,000.
30 to
Plus-
40.
Plus,
Yeah,
plus,
yeah.
plus premium, plus sales tax.
Yeah, that went up over 40, that one, I think.
Well, way
And
before.
it needed some work.
Yes.
There was a
we know
restoration
that,
done by-
yes, I wasn't getting there, so, well, that's fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Do we want the light on?
Great, thank you, Tim. That was fantastic. I think what we learned from that is that you do have to be very resourceful yourself in taking on a project like this, but also know how to tap into the resources available to you. Somebody in Spain, you got it in France, you contacted somebody in Spain, you found them through Darren, another former CAPS member. Being in a club is what it's all about. Asking people who lead you to the next person, who then puts you in touch with the right person. And it's all about finding the right people, isn't it? And I think now we've got a good idea of if we were ever to take on a project like that, who we would start with.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, I don't know what Mark would think of this, but I think it would be terrific if Tim could provide all the sources and print it up and make them available, because as he was speaking, I kept thinking, where did he get that?
Yeah.
How did he get that?
Yeah, I'm sure we all did. Yeah, good point.
That's a great idea.
Tim, in fact, I've asked all the people who are presenting today if they would just write up either as a summary or, if they wish, and we would certainly love it if they would, as a full description of the project with exactly that information. Yeah, I mean, please do. Yeah.
I might add, being members of related clubs, I would call them, like the Music Box Society International, the clock club, all of those kinds of things, the connections are unbelievable when you get into the,
Yeah.
especially Music Box Society International. You can get governors, there are people who do specialized work.
Yeah.
It's costly, that's not cheap, but it's there.
Yep, absolutely. It's interesting that I look at Facebook pages of a number of different groups, and there's so many people, which this is a good thing, I think, there's so many people who are buying their first phonograph, or they've got several, but they've never fixed them in the past, that ask what I would consider to be some pretty basic questions. And that's good, again, not being critical at all, but I'm thinking, why don't you join a club? Why don't you get yourself into the network so that you can talk to people? And one of the reasons we have a 20-minute or half-hour break here is so that we can talk to people and say, so tell me again, Tim, where did you get that metal work done? I mean, that's what it's all about. That's what being in a club is about. And as Ed says, connect with other types of clubs where people are working with metal or working with wood or working with springs. It's all related somehow. So great, thank you. That's wonderful. That is quite spectacular, Tim. Thank you so much for bringing it along. So now we're going to turn to one of our members on the other side of the country in Victoria, BC, and that is Don Mayer. And Don, would you like to come on to start with and just introduce your topic, and then we have the video ready to run when you're ready to let us do that. Thank you, Don.
Thanks, Mike. The little project that I undertook was nothing compared to what we saw Tim dealing with. It pales in comparison, but that didn't prevent it from languishing for the last year or so on my dining room table. So it was Mike's suggestion that we do something to show off our little projects that got me moving on it to take it to the next stage. So it's a Pathé Actuel. It was a machine that in the back of my mind I thought I'd like to have and knew nothing about. And Mike, I'll just let you roll the video.
Okay. Oh, sorry, it's gone to the wrong file.
Okay, full disclaimer here. I have never owned a Pathé Actuel phonograph, but it's always sort of been in the back of my mind that it might be a nice machine to acquire. This machine came up locally and appeared to be in excellent shape. So I went and had a look at it, and the gentleman was kind enough to play it for me. And I knew that it was playing very poorly, but thought that I could probably fix that without really having much notion of how these things worked. You may notice that inside the speaker cone, which I later refer to as a diaphragm, and in fact is referred to as the diffuser in Pathé literature, that there's a piece of tape, paper tape that's been glued on the inside of the diffuser in order to patch some damage that has occurred to it. Here's a view of the outside of the diffuser, and you can see other patches that have been applied there. Fortunately, the glue was a water-soluble one, so I was able to use a Q-tip, and water patience was able to remove the patch jobs. And as it turned out, the damage to it wasn't quite as severe as it originally looked. Later, I took a mixture of wood glue and stain and dabbed it strategically on the cracks in order to seal those so that the cone or diffuser once again would be airtight. In anticipation of having to replace the diffuser, I actually ordered a replacement one from a fellow, I believe in New York City, and it came, and his usual business was replacing speaker cones. The product he supplied was happens to be exactly, I think, 7/1000ths of an inch thick, exactly like the original. But as you can see in the next little video clip, I had to make a decision whether to use the original one or the replacement one. Okay, this is me having a look at the two diaphragms that I have the option of choosing between for the Pathé Actuel. and I've got to determine which one to install. So I'm just going to hold one up like this, and I'm just going to touch it. And now the comparison is which one sounds better. My intuition is that the original one is a little bit more lively, so I think that's the one that I'm going to go with. So this is the original diffuser installed in its frame and ready to be installed back into the machine. The next issue that surfaced, albeit a small one, is that the two springs in the tone arm don't match, one on either side of the needle holder. The task then became to wind new springs on the metal lathe, doing some calculations as to the size of the arbor, the size of the piano wire, which I think was a number 19.5 piano wire. It will appear that the two springs are slightly longer than the original, and that is intentional because the end coils of the springs had to be ground flat so as to sit squarely in the recess for them. And because the ends of the springs were tapered to nothing, they were bendable. And so in the original spring, I believe, is likely a little bit shorter than it would have been when it was originally made. So I made them a little bit longer to compensate. Now, in taking a closer look at the tone arm assembly, it became clear to me that there were a couple of pieces that were missing. And what is supposed to happen is that there is a rod or tube that goes through the center of this 1-inch diameter tubular arm and subsequently connects to the center of the diffuser. But the part that was supposed to exit the tone arm and connect to the diffuser was entirely missing. You can see in this diagram the part of the apparatus which was non-existent when I got the machine. The mystery was that the machine had played when I saw it, albeit poorly, and I had assumed that there was nothing that was missing, that it was simply out of adjustment, but I couldn't be more wrong about that. This is what I saw when I looked at the end of the tone arm, and you can see that the end of the inner tube has completely rusted and broken off. And I was sure that that was there when I bought the machine because I had heard it play. So I can't tell you how long I looked in the car in all of the possible places to find the part that might have dropped off, because as you'll see, manufacturing the missing bit was a bit problematic. The first thing I did was to identify what the original connector looked like, and luckily a fellow phonograph collector sent me a photo of his unit, and from that I was able to deduce the dimensions of the piece that I was missing. Despite having looked at many sources, I was unable to find a steel tube which would replicate the original, so instead I chose to go with aluminum rod, wishing to keep the weight as light as possible. And what I then did is I cut the existing rod that was remaining inside of the tone arm so that I could flip it over and reorient it so that it would be visible when one was to look at the mechanism. And the replacement aluminum rod was on the inside, and nobody will be able to see that. The next step was to determine the appropriate total length, which I had to do by fitting it to a jig that I put on my dining room table, and cut the aluminum portion to length, and then fitted the parts together and used crazy glue to connect them. Originally, the little missing piece that attaches to the center of the diffuser would have been gold in color, so my effort to give it some of that look was to use a paste that is available from any art store that you use for gilding frames, and I was able to put that on. And luckily the part is so small that I don't think the eye is going to be able to see the difference. Well, I've got the transmission rod installed back in what I believe is called the diffuser, and you can get a bit of a sense of that if you look in here. You can see that the rod exits down in there. there's really not much of a difference in the way that the manufactured part looks from the way it would have been originally. In getting this machine together, I have not installed the lid support because it's bent, as I discovered. It's been about 1.5 years since I had this thing apart. When you play it, the idea is to have this end door opened up here like this. That will reflect the sound forward. And there's also a door in the front here, which exposes a little grill. That doesn't really do too much to change the sound. So I'll turn the microphone around here and I'll give it a little play.
Well, thank you, Don. That was very professionally put together, if I may say so, and very clear. But another example of painstaking detail, isn't it? You've got to have the aptitude for that, I think, if you're going to take on that kind of work. But it's fantastic to bring back a machine that was clearly well worth it, because it sounded so good, didn't it? That was very smooth. What year would that have been, Don?
From what reading I've done, I think it was 1920. For the purists out there, I think the Velvetone records were made between 28 and 35, so I may have mixed electrical recording with acoustic playback. I hope I won't be chastised too much for that. I'll just throw in, I would love to know, I wasn't thoroughly excited about the quality of the sound. It's passable, but I'd love to hear the other diffuser to see how it would compare. But that would mean removing that little piece of brass cone in the center of the diaphragm and reinstalling it. And I think I run the risk of ruining the original by doing that. I did try without wrenching on it too hard. I knew how it came apart, but I just wasn't prepared to go any further. So if anybody happens to have a center portion of one of those diaphragms in a toolbox somewhere, I would love to hear about that.
Okay, there you are. The message is out. Well, thank you. That was amazing. Again, a very painstaking job, a very good job, and another machine that will. I think somebody said it earlier. Once a machine has been restored, it's probably never going to need it ever again. And somebody, now that it looks good, it's never going to be put in a basement or an attic again, is it? It will surely survive forever. So this kind of work is really worthwhile, because it takes us from the age of when the thing was just old and neglected, and it brings it back to an age in which it will always be treasured now by somebody at least. So great, well done, thank you, Don. Now for something completely different. Mike DiCecco does quite a bit of work with jukeboxes, and he's going to tell us about his restoration of a Wurlitzer 500, an early Wurlitzer machine from about 1938. So, over to you, Mike.
We can leave the lights on. Mark, can we hold off on the pictures for now?
Yeah, I'm just setting it up.
Want the light on?
No, I prefer it off, actually, because we'll be showing the picture. So, I thought I'd start off by saying, so what's a 1938 Wurlitzer 500? In 38, Wurlitzer came out with 3 models. There was a tabletop model, there was a smaller compact economy model, which was the 600, and then there was a 500, which was sort of like the Cadillac version of it. It's very big, it's about the size of a fridge. It's about probably, I think, 425 pounds to move these things. And ironically, the jukeboxes at the time sort of had a hierarchy. The new models always went into the best establishments. And then as they got a year or two older, they were moved down to the smaller diners and whatever, and then they continually moved these things down. But it was expected with the operators, they had dollies and things, and they'd be lugging these 400-pound machines up and down stairs and different locations in the establishments. And it's all to get people to put their coin into the machine so they can hear their favorite latest tune. And I got this machine in 1995, and it's kind of a funny story in a way, in that I already had a 1946 Wurlitzer 1015. That's the bubble machine. It's the most famous jukebox people know. That was what I had to have. So that was the 78 machine. And then I got a Seaberg machine from the 50s, play 45s. And I had a couple of friends who would go to the Chicago Jukebox Show, and that happened, that's actually Chicago Musical Coin and something. It would happen twice a year, and I think it's still on. And they were going in 1995, and I made the mistake saying, well, if there's anything interesting there, like, give me a call. So I'm at work, and I get this phone call, Mike, there's this jukebox here, you've got to have it. And they were in the parking lot. Apparently before the show starts, all the vendors are there on the Friday before, and they're exchanging things. You could buy stuff in the parking lots, buy parts and things like that. So my friend called me and says, Mike, there's this machine here, it plays 78s, I want it. And he says, it's pretty good, like it. All the plastics are there, like I think it's a good machine for you. It's only $400. $400. So of course I'm at work, so I better call my wife. And then so I called Liz, and she says, yeah, that sounds like a good price, okay. And they're gonna bring it back for me from Chicago, because he was bringing some other stuff too. So how could I lose, right? What a deal, $400. And he said, the cabinet needs a little bit of work, and there's a few parts of this, but you can find that. And one of the fellows who was down there, he had worked on my other machine, so he knew the mechanisms, whatever, so I trusted him, and they were good. And I was quite floored. About a week later, they delivered it on the back of his truck on a rainy day. And I was looking at the pictures we're going to use are from scanned photographs, because we didn't have digital at the time. And it was actually 29 years ago, on April 29th, 1995, that I got this thing. So it's kind of ironic in a way to put this presentation together for it. So I was, needless to say, a little surprised when I saw what I had bought. And I just want to check my notes, make sure I covered everything else. The thing about the Wurlitzer 500 is, it was a grandiose machine in this time, and it was the first jukebox to ever have animation. And animation is when it does something other than just sit there and light up. This one had revolving color cylinders in the front, which it was the first time Wurlitzer used it. And they weren't sure, should we put it in the pilasters, the side plastics, or should we put it in the grill? So they had 2 models where you could order animation either on one or the other. This one happens to have it in the grill, which is the way that the industry sort of went to, I guess, draw the attention to the music coming out of the speaker. So, and the fortunate part is that the animation units were still there, because often they were missing. And the earlier Wurlitzers, prior to World War II, a lot of them got consumed by the war. Not as you would think for the metal, but because Wurlitzer was looking for a way, hey, we want to keep selling new jukeboxes, but we're not allowed to make any more. So we'll take our older machines from the late 30s and we'll make new cabinets for them. So Wurlitzer 500s were often sort of cannibalized, and the mechanisms and sound systems were taken out and put in a Victory model machine, which had no metal and no plastics, that used glass instead. So a lot of the 500s ended up being destroyed, really, or changed in appearance. So not as many of them survived. So it was neat to get an original 500 back. So Mike asked in his presentation questions like, the decision to restore, do you do it or not? I had no problem making that decision because, as you'll see from the pictures, it's like this thing had to be restored because it couldn't have, it didn't even work. It couldn't have been used in its current state. And I wanted to point out too, I thoroughly enjoyed the last two presentations and seeing how parts were made and using original paints and things like that. And I learned a lot from this fellow Bob, who had worked on my prior mechanisms, and just knowing other jukebox collectors, that it's a different mentality for restoring these things than it would be for vintage phonographs, in that you don't have to use the exact finish that Wurlitzer used in 1938 on the cabinet. The paints, you get a paint that's close enough. And the reason for that is that so many times the operators had to keep replacing parts, and there's actually a company called Victory Glass that makes a lot of reproduction parts. And reproduction's acceptable in the jukebox restoration. Yes, it's great if you have all the original parts there, but so few of them ended up surviving with original parts that people just buy reproduction, and they fit pretty good and they look very original. So I'll point out things in this restoration with what I did. And unfortunately for this model, because it's not the most popular jukebox, there were things that weren't available, so I had to make them. Now, I brought about 20 pictures. I probably had 2 or 3 times that amount, so I had to sort of chop down what I did, so maybe I can talk about some of the pieces that were more difficult. But essentially, when I got this jukebox delivered to me, I said to myself, oh my God, what did I get myself into? It's like, my heart just sank. I just thought, I'll never get this thing working. But the thing that gave me hope was, and it was dark by this time, I plugged in a couple of the light sockets that were in the back, and I saw the side of it light up with this glowing red. I thought, oh, there is hope for this thing. It sort of reminded me, yes, there's a spark of what it used to look like in 1938. So that sort of motivated me. In general, I find in restoring something like a jukebox, it's similar to restoring old cars in that you break it down into components. You've got the cabinet, you've got the amplifier, the mechanism, and then you've got the cosmetics, the small parts about it. There's rechroming involved, refinishing woodwork, making pieces that you can't find anywhere else. Just seeing what's available, going to eBay, there's sometimes parts on there. Now there's a lot more suppliers for parts, of used parts, which are good. So and just over the years, I was able to accumulate what I needed. And I'll tease you a bit with it, that there was one part that took me 17 years to get, and I ended up paying more for that one part than I did for the entire jukebox. But that's the way it is sometimes when you're restoring something unusual. It's true labor of love, and again, we're looking at what I came up with 29 years ago. So it has been a while. And we'll move to the first picture.
Okay, hold on. Sorry.
Try to point out a bit more what you're seeing. Can we get a little bigger on the screen?
Not really.
Okay. So I don't have a pointer per se, but if you notice the front, now that's what it looked like, and it's all wet because it was in the rain on the back of the guy's truck, but apparently it had been in a storage shed in New England, and it was very damp, so that affected the wood. And yes, okay, so let's look at this. You can see the veneer is all bubbling over here.
Got no right to do that.
Maybe we can use the mouse so that people
Oh, yeah,
can
yeah.
see it. So this area here, you can see all the veneer bubbled up. And this part here is supposed to look like wood. It's actually painted. That was all scuffed and rusted. And underneath, the numbers here are missing. So this piece here with the numbers, 24 selections, is available. The metal was all there, which is good. The plastics were there. And these plastics are very thick. They're a good 1/4 of an inch or more. So it's possible to buff them down. Whereas later on, Wurlitzer used thinner plastics, and they all warped and yellowed, and they make reproduction plastics. Okay, we'll go to the next picture. So This is a good shot to remember for just how bad it was. If you look at the veneer missing on the bottom, and the animation units go up in here. Can we move the mouse maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, up in here, but at least the light sockets were there. And I want to point out, you could see on the side of the lights, there's these plastic strips here, and they're held in by these little brackets. They were not available. I had to manufacture those myself from just sheeted plastic and then paint the gold supports to match. They were good. The grill cloth is available from Victory Glass, which was good. And I want to point out too, can you just highlight these two little decorations in the wood? You'll see that they were reproduced too. And we can't see it in this picture, but there's a piece of the base missing. That's what we started with. Go to the next one. There's the side of it. It doesn't look as bad as it was, but this veneer could just be lifted off. It was just peeling off in pieces, and there's huge chunks of it missing. This actually, highlight that little button there. There's a tiny little dot there, and anybody have an idea what that little dot is for?
Reset. Yeah.
You got it.
There you go.
If a record's on and you don't like it, you push that tiny little button and it trips the mechanism and it'll go to the next song. It's sort of hidden. Okay, let's go to the next picture. This is what I wanted to show at the base of the front. This entire piece on the bottom was missing. It was like rounded off. That had to be made. And of course the wood replaced on the veneer. Okay, this is the inside of the box. And I'd like to point out over here, just highlight. You'll see there's brackets there for something. That's where the coin equipment goes. And of course that was missing. That's the amplifier, speaker, cash box. And by this point, the fellow who delivered the box for me, the jukebox, I told him, look, you know mechanisms, so you work on the mechanism for me. So by that time he had taken it out, and there's really just two little bushings that have to be changed on it. There really wasn't much work at all. Now I know how to do these things, but at the time I thought, well, I'll let this fellow do it for me. So, but it was such a mess inside. Let's go next. And I thought this picture was funny. These are my two kids, Veronica and Raymond. She was 6 at the time and 4, and I sent this picture to them. I said, do you remember this? And it was their idea to climb inside of it. They were there to help me. And now they're in their 30s and they laughed at the picture. But one thing that I found was funny too that I didn't tell them. Any idea what this stuff is up on top? Mark, could you highlight that gray strip there?
Asbestos?
That's right. Yeah, because there's a light bulb that goes across there, so you got to protect the wood. So we're able to just use asbestos, as they commonly did at the time. It's still on there to protect the cabinet, and I guess it's original, but I realized that later. And now we're moving into the restoration. So now I've taken all the plastics out, stripped it down to just the cabinet itself, and it's on my front lawn. And what I did is, I'm not real good at doing refinishing work, and I wanted it done properly. And as Mike said earlier, through CAPS, you get to meet a lot of people. And there used to be a fellow in our club called Marty McKenzie. I got to know Marty well. He'd been a member here for a long time. And, am I on it? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there you go, sorry.
Marty had been a member for a long time, and he had restored all kinds of furniture and things like that. So I asked him about doing the cabinet for me. He says, yeah, I'll give it a shot. He also does hot rods and things like that now, and became great friends over it. So this was the first thing I gave him to restore. But he said, it's better, you'll save money if you take it apart yourself, which was better for me too, because then I knew where every screw was and all the pieces. So my job was to strip it down, and I painted the inside with the blue paint and the silver paint. Can we go to the next picture? So this is in Marty's garage. He's now sanded down the box, and he's starting to apply the veneer to it. And you can see he's actually got the top of the jukebox off too. I had a separate picture of it, but I didn't think we'd have time to show it. Can you go to the next one? And this is him, he's clamping on the veneer as he's working on it, and he's filling in any little gaps and things like that that happen. So that's the jukebox lying on its side, and the front is actually sticking up in the air. Go to the next one. These are the plastics that go in the front of the jukebox, and I did the polishing of these myself. The one on the right is very yellowish, and they would get stained because of age, because of the type of plastic they used, and because of the nicotine that these places were always in. And so they came up really well. It's just a matter of buffing and polishing, and the plastics are really thick, so there's lots to work with, and they came up quite nice. Go to the next picture. And this is one of the red side plastics, and I took a picture of it because all that brown crap coming off of it going down the drain is nicotine. And that's typically what you deal with. Every jukebox I've had has been filthy like that. And so you have to wear gloves so that you don't get the stuff into your skin. But it was such a mess to deal with it. But once it was done, it was dull, and then you just buffed it up with a polishing wheel and just plastic polishes, and it came out fabulous. Next picture. Now, this is the inside. I pointed to some brackets that were missing. And Mark, could I have you just highlight that part there and those 3 copper boxes? That's the elusive part. It took me 17 years to get. That's the coin mechanism. This model had 2 versions. One was mechanical, where you put the coin in and you push the slide in, and it would all work. It would work some levers and things to have the coin go down. This was the first year they came up with an electrical selector, and that's why those 3 copper boxes are actually little butterfly switches. As the coin flies through, it flicks, and then it sends a signal to an accumulator, which tells you how many credits you get. That part took me 17 years to get, and I paid $500 US on eBay for it. And it was another friend in Caps who knew I was looking for it for so long. He said, Mike, there's CoinMac on eBay, you gotta take a look at it. And sure enough, it was the right piece with every tiny little bit going to it. Even, you see there's a little chute that goes down into the, right there, yes. Goes into the cash box. There's transformers, there's an accumulator, everything was there. I couldn't believe it. I had slowly accumulated a few of the missing parts, but I got the entire assembly in one shot. So that was the greatest accomplishment. And prior to getting that, to make the jukebox work, you had to pull a wire on top just to give you credits, but it's not the way they work. Now you just put your coin in the slot, push it in, pull it back, and then it comes to life. Let's go to the next one. And this is the jukebox after my friend Marty had finished it. We got the mechanism in it. The plastics are starting to go in. And you can see the beautiful job he did with the veneer. He said he used the heart of the tree. I believe it was maple that he used. And he had it matched. He used the heart of the tree, and it sort of mirrors itself here and there. Just did an incredible job. And I don't know if you can see it, but I pointed out the little lines in the wood itself right there and there. He even duplicated those. And he made the base on the bottom that was missing. He spent, took him a couple of months, but he said it came along quite well, and he'd never done a mess like that before. And he ended up doing another jukebox for me afterwards too. I was very happy with the work that he did. Okay, next one. And now the plastics are starting to go in the front. It's starting to come together. I forgot to mention in my introduction, there were a lot of parts missing from this thing. So yeah, it was mainly there, but things such as that title board, can you highlight the red part? That's where you put all the little strips that shows the songs in there. That was missing. That's actually a reproduction that they made, I think, for a year or two in the late 90s. And so I was able to get it. Again, it's not that popular a machine, so they just did a small run of them. Looks exactly like the original. And things such as the tone arm was missing, the motor wasn't working properly, there's mirrors that go in the top that were missing, the back door was missing, both upper and lower. Can just go on and on, but it's just a matter of slowly accumulating the parts. Go to the next one. And here's comparing side by side of what it started with. So I think you'll agree that there was no decision about do I restore this or not. Like I had to. It would not have worked the way it was originally, and it was totally neglected and just almost thrown away. But I just saw the original beauty of it, and just I thought it was well worth it. And even little things such as the Wurlitzer emblem in the front, that lights up right there. And you can see on the original one, all the original colors are gone. So I found, again, paints that were close enough. Took me about 3 hours to hand paint it, but it was well worth it. And when you pay attention to the details there, it makes all the difference. Every screw head was polished. I tried to keep it as original as possible, but I had to use some reproduction parts. And could we go to, is that the end of the pictures? Oh, then I took some today to show what it's like, so you can see it lit up, and there's a short video of it too. You see the beautiful job that was done on the base. Now, and actually, my friend Marty told me, he had seen other people restoring jukeboxes and they used a black base because it sort of accents the rest of the wood. It wasn't made that way originally. So that's not original. And I have the companion model to this, which is a Wurlitzer 600, and it's just a plain brown base, but I think it looks better with the black, and he suggested it, so I went with it. And it's things like that on jukeboxes you could probably get away with that you never would with something like a Class M.
Play the video?
Is there another picture? Okay, this is a close-up of the mechanism. In the back there, you highlight that part there. You can't see it here, maybe above the record stack. You can see pleats there. It was originally pleated with a gold cloth. I thought, how am I ever going to duplicate that? Well, fortunately, a cousin of mine happened to be in the fashion industry of all things, like he used to make jackets and things like that, out in BC. He says, I can make that for you. So he pleated it, and then you put a reproduction plastic sheet over it, and there it was. It all came together. And there's mirrors on the side that were missing. And in terms of originality, if you're restoring Wurlitzer jukebox, you do not keep the original cartridge in there unless you don't care about your records, because they track about 130 to 150 grams, as much or more than a gramophone. And if you want to play good records in your jukebox, this would destroy them. But they made them track so heavy because people were dancing in front of them, whatever. And they actually had jukebox records that had the same selection on both sides. So when one side wore out, you flipped it over and you had additional plays. So what most restorers do with any 78 jukebox machine is you remove the original cartridge. It's a horseshoe magnet, weighs a ton, and you can just replace it with a modern ceramic cartridge, tiny little thing like that, costs about $20. This one's tracking about 13 grams now, and it saves your records, sounds fabulous, and it's not original. You can keep the original parts if you want. But it's sort of like a modern improvement. And then actually, in 1948, Wurlitzer went to a lighter cartridge too, because they knew that they were just too heavy. So it's an improvement on the machine. We go to the next picture? Oh, before we do, and over here too, I just wanted to point out how the wood grain paint was touched up. It looks like wood and the new numbers are there. This is new plastic too, it's been reproduced. And all the metal, of course, has been replated, because they get very dull. The original nickel just has a dull finish to it all the time. There's the record stack itself with the selections. Okay, go to the next one. Oh, and here's a video of it. So you'll see it's going to pull a record out of the stack on the left. The record's pulled out, the turntable pushes up to the tone arm, and then it begins. And you can see the animation in the front, the colors changing. To me, this makes it all worth doing it.
Oh, yeah.
The red doesn't look right. It's a really deep red. It's just the way it got captured by the camera. I'm just trying to show the sides, the finish on it. It's a really deep glowing red. Looks scary on Halloween. And there's the mechanism playing. Because this machine's from 1938, I figured it'd be neat to have like big band in it. So I have it sort of set up as though it would have been playing during World War II, music like that. And it was actually, Mike Bryan and I were talking on the phone once about some cat business, and I'm sitting in the living room looking at this thing across from me, and I said, do you ever notice like sometimes people just look through your collection? And we had that discussion that you have something like that sitting in your living room, people come in and it's like, don't ask questions, nothing. And other people appreciate it, so that was it. Yeah, any questions about the restoration? Ed?
Just a fast comment. We're talking about networking and how important it is. People wouldn't be aware that there's a company called Fab Audio. Jim Fabian used to do all the work for Bay Bluer Radio.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
now located in Coburg. And when I looked at the actual speaker or restoration of this speaker, he restores 100% speakers.
Wow.
He does the coning, the things. You can't find these guys. Been in business 38. How long is it going to last? And that veneer is mirror image cut. They get the board, they cut it, and then they turn it. So it isn't the heart, it's just.
Oh, that's what he told me that.
Yeah, but it's just a mirror image. They do that in furniture, quarter cut, half cut, and then put the two pieces together.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was so pleased with the work he'd done on it. Any other questions? Oh.
Okay,
Thank you very much, Mike.
Yes. Great, here we are. Great, thank you, Mike. That was another example of patience, great patience. So how many years altogether, Mike? You said 17 years to find that part, so...
It probably took about a good 3 years to restore it and have it playing, but it was finding that coin mechanism that I should have added. The coin mechanisms are so hard to find because when the operators took them off the route, they ripped out the coin mech so no one could compete with them, and they threw it away. So hardly any of them survived.
Ah, yeah, I wondered about that because coin mechanisms are always missing, aren't they?
Yeah.
And
That's why.
in this case, just about everything else was missing as well by the sound of it. Yeah.
And I think it's abrated.
Yeah. So anyway, a fantastic job.
Thank
Ed? Yeah.
And Wurlitzer used to take the old machines and take them to Buffalo and crush them.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
pictures of them
Another
hitting
problem.
them with a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
Crush them all.
Oh, criminal. Anyway, that was great. Thank you very much, Mike. That was something very different and very special. So back to phonographs now, and just one item, a horn. Now you see before you today lots of horns on the table. So horns are a big issue for a phonograph, and very often I think we're confronted with the decision to restore or not restore. And I'm sure there's different views on this, but in many cases, it's not a good idea to restore them. But if they're too far gone, then they got to be done. And Steve Redmond is going to show us a wonderful example of a restoration he did on an Edison horn. So, over to you, Steve.
Last time I gave a small presentation here, I forgot my main reason for actually giving the presentation. I've put together a Facebook group called Toronto and Area Phonograph Collectors Group. And it goes to exactly this theme. Whenever I restore a machine, I like putting before and after pictures up. And it's very much about sharing information about the restoration efforts as well. So I thought this is first on the list. I don't want to forget this. I think we're up to 150 members. And it's a little bit exclusive just to Toronto because well, there's two parts to it. There's the sharing information on restoration, but it's also about phonograph sightings. So if you're in an antique mall and you see cylinders and it looks like a good deal, people throw those sightings up on the Facebook page. I got that idea from one of the American collector groups where I would see a machine and I'd think, oh man, I want that machine. And I would look at it and be, oh, it's in Florida. It's a little too far to drive. So I try to keep this as a sort of exclusively Toronto because of that. So those are the two things, but I think it's kind of on target here. Okay, so the before picture is, brace yourself here, folks. You can see the light going right through this horn here.
Yeah, right at the top.
Can you turn the light off?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay, a lot of people would think that's too far gone, but I've been working on horns for a while now. And,
Look at the holes.
Yeah,
those are-
It's literally got holes all through it.
daylight coming through.
Yeah. This is actually a good reason why you should never store horns on a basement floor.
Right.
All the rust is right around the edge, so that's like marinated moisture from a cement floor or from a basement floor. So as a rule, that's a good lesson. Don't store them on the basement floor. I've got the after effect here. Do you have a picture of the?
You want to go through?
Just to shock people at the before and after, I thought we'd go out to right to the after. Okay, so there's the end result there. Now, the wonderful thing about this horn, even as wrecked as it is, I was able to save all the original flowers. It's like they used an extra thick oil paint or something. And because I thought, well, I'll have to really kind of fake a couple flowers. I didn't have to do that at all. There were a few scratches I had to touch up, but once I cleaned the horn and I put I can't remember if it was a lacquer or I think it was a clear shellac. The colors that came saturating right up. And I thought, oh, this is wonderful. I'm going to be able to save all of these flowers, spread all the holes through it. Now, in terms of the technique of fixing the holes, this is just auto body. You know, I had an old car when I was a teenager, and so I was pretty handy at it. The holes are so big, though, that I had to do some patchwork. Like they're just way too big. So I used a really thin sheet metal, and instead of using Bondo, I've used something that's much more expensive, but it's much better. The bond is much better. It's just JD Weld. And the thing with using that product is that if you have to sand it the next day, because it sands like marble the next day, if you wait a week, it sands like granite. So it's like. Okay, on to the show.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I lost my train of thought here, but might go back to my notes, I guess. Okay, so the wonderful thing about this E-horn here is that it is a fairly opaque blue, where if you want to tell whether a horn's been repainted in the 1970s, flowered horns usually are semi-transparent. So you can see a little bit of that nickel plating coming through. But I caught a break on this one because I knew the E-horn was an opaque blue. Like to do that properly, if there was a semi-transparent quality, I'd have to re-nickel plate the whole horn. And of course, financially, it's just not worth doing. I might be wrong. I know a lot of collectors think this was exclusively for the standard E, but on 3 different occasions, and Mark just encountered this as well, I've seen these on fireside machines. So I think maybe in a similar way that you'd have a aftermarket horn, they may have offered these up on other machines as well. Okay, in terms of the other positive thing about this horn is that very, very often horns will have nasty dents in them. And with steel horns, it's very hard to get dents out of steel horns. Very often I'll turn down a horn if it has too many dents in it. There's techniques, you know, again, one of the sources I use are auto body experts. So I actually joined an auto body group for half a day. I just had a question. And before they let me join, they asked me why I wanted to join the group. And so I sent them a picture of the phonograph horn. And I said, well, I'm trying to figure out how to get a concave dent out of the upper part of a horn. And they let me join anyway. And the experts within that group, they were wonderful. They didn't suggest some $500 tool, you know, for my $100 horn. They suggested a very practical way of creating a long wooden dowel and prying out the dent from the inside. So I use Facebook groups like that all the time. I'll join a group for half a day, get the answer, and then, you know, unfollow the group.
So, Steve, very often a horn like that has been kept on the floor like that and has got kind of squashed. So you always get that bending back at the widest edge. Did you have anything like that on that? Did you have to deal with those kind of folds?
No, this is actually very rare because horns are almost always dented on the edge. Yeah. And so that was one of the other wonderful things about this horn is that not only the flowers were in good shape, you know, as wrecked as that other picture showed, but there were very few dents in it. So that was one. So you get dents out, sometimes you get them out just with your thumbs.
Yeah.
But, and there's techniques where you heat metal and cool it and heat it. Because one of the problems with steel is the metal stretches. Like brass is wonderful, it has malleability and you can sort of push it back. Steel horns are much more difficult though. And I think as a rule, because I have a theory about this, like I've dropped morning glory horns from pretty high heights and they don't dent. And I think the way they got dents is people stored them on the floor, maybe in the closet. And at Christmas time, when they were reaching up to get their Christmas decorations, they stepped on the edges of them.
Yeah.
So I think as a rule, you should never store horns on the floor.
No.
But anyway, I think I'm gonna.
Do you want to show the decal?
Oh yeah, the decal.
Yeah.
I told Don this.
Yeah.
That was
Mark,
it
this would be a
before.
4-minute presentation. So.
That was before, right?
Yeah. So a lot of people would say that decal's a write-off, but I knew because I restored metal signs in the past that a good rust remover can bring out some pretty spectacular results. So the way I got the rust remover on there, because to submerge the whole horn in rust remover would be like, $500 worth of rust remover, was I created a little swimming pool out of plasticine just for that area. And overnight, 24 hours.
Wow.
So it
Yeah,
it didn't-
unbelievable, eh?
Yeah, I cheated a little bit here. I used a silver pen and I dotted some of the silver, but it came up pretty close to that. So, but like I said, I restore antiques in general, that a rust remover on metal signs, very often you can be just shocked at how much better they come up.
And look at the side here. Like, there's nothing there. I had a fireside horn that someone had painted over and it had worn out, and I gave it to Steve. And when he showed it to me and it was done, the original decal was there, and it looked like brand new. I'm like, how did you get that off without stripping? He stripped it in patiently in very small layers and got down to the original decal.
Yeah, I've recovered, I think at least four decals that way.
Yeah.
And my rule when it comes to whether a horn should be restored, like I very much I think consensus here that it's got to be really beat up. You like that antique character, you want to keep that. And my rule is, if Grandpa repainted the horn in 1970, then that's time to repaint it, because he usually didn't do an appropriate job. And the other case is when it's just a rust bucket, like the case I have here.
Anyway, well, you did a fabulous job with that, so.
Well, thanks very much. And don't forget, Toronto and area phonograph collector group. I've posted a lot of my before and after pictures on there.
Yes,
And,
indeed. Very good. Thank you very much. Good. Well, thank you, Steve. So let's move on now to the other end of that horn and look at the machines themselves. Blaine McCutcheon has brought with him two Edison firesides, and he does a lot of restoration work. He's going to talk to us about the restoration work he has undertaken or is undertaking with these two Edison firesides. So, Blaine, if you would join us, please.
Thanks, Mike. Brought along my toolkit.
Right. Thank you.
I think this might answer a bunch of your questions.
We can move these.
Yeah, I'll put them in order how we're going to talk. So many of you have been listening to all this restoration work, and you probably must be thinking, well, I don't know if I want to do this. Some of these guys are really good, like Steve. Like, I would never try and do something like he's done. But Steve is he's so agreeable to helping anybody. So if you're thinking you can't do some of this, contact the club members. Mike keeps saying this between every person that comes up here. This is a club, and we all talk together, and we all help each other. So,
Actually, can I say something just
Yeah.
about Steve again? I bought an opera and something had hit the lid and put a hole about that big in the lid. Yeah,
Yeah.
like a hammer hole. It could be. So I took it to Steve and I don't know what he did to fill it in, and then he painted grain on it and everything, and you literally could not see it. On the inside too. It had completely disappeared. was unbelievable.
An opera is a pretty rare machine.
Yeah.
So about restoration work, if you're thinking about to start doing restoring your own machines, there's 4 classifications that I can think about, and you're gonna have to choose one of these classifications when you do your restoration. First one is just leave it original. There's a lot of pros and cons for doing that. I know people who, that's their philosophy. They just leave it original. The second phase that I like to talk about is doing what some of the members here have been doing and what we're talking about today, restoration. And one of the policies around restoration is do no harm. But outside of that, there's a little bit more you're going to have to do. The third classification that people will do, and a lot of us are going to fall into this, and although there's some mixing between the two, is refinishing. So you hear people say, well, no, you don't want to refinish it. We got to keep it all original. Well, sometimes you can't do that. So, you know, you're going to have to figure out, well, am I going to restore it? Am I going to refinish it? And am I going to do a blend of the two? And the fourth classification that we could talk a lot about this, but it's the people who do a refinishing or a restoration, and they take what I call artistic interpretation. Now that may sound funny, but I have at home a signet horn, just like the one we've seen, and somebody repainted it, did a beautiful job repainting it, and he painted bluebirds flying in the signet horn. Well, that's, you know, a lot of people are gonna say, no, you shouldn't do that. Edison never did that from the factory, but it was his machine. And the person who owned it, he really liked it. And I have done, I don't know if you remember years ago, I put up a whole bunch of presentations of different phonograph horns that had been painted, some flowered, some not so flowered. And I'll tell you, the love-hate relationship that came out of that. It was either loved or hated. So those are the 4 different types. When you're going to do something, you're going to have to classify, you're going to have to set rules for yourself like Tim did, like Steve does. You have to figure out what you're going to do, what are going to be my rules, and then you're going to have to see where it goes from there. And like Tim said, no one restoration is the same. Every one of these is different. So you have to be flexible. The other thing you have to do, you have to get on the internet. You hear everybody here when they come up here and they say, well, I had to learn this. I had to join this club just to learn how I was going to do some auto body repairs. These are the things you have to do. Just the club members here will help you only so far. Once you get outside of that, you're going to get into other people's categories of what they like to do, and so you're going to have to join that. One of the things a lot of the club members here belong to is something called the Talking Machine Forum. It's down in the States. It's all over the world. Huge membership there. There's lots of chat forums. You can learn a lot there. The other thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to develop your relationship with the people around you. I go to a local sheet metal fabricator. He doesn't like seeing me because I'm going to walk in with some rusty old horn and I need something made. But you develop that relationship and you work with these people and you find people that you like. Another thing you have to do, if you can't do it, you have to find somebody that can do the woodworking. If your cabinets are broken, if you can't do it yourself, or it's too technical, because maybe you need a lathe, or maybe you need some really fine molding made, you're gonna have to find a woodworker to help you with this. So all of these things, that's what you're gonna have to develop along as you go into your restoration. So I got some stuff here that I'm gonna do the restoration on. Oh, I think I need some light. So this one here is a machine. This is a refinishing. And this machine that I refinished started out like this. So, and it was like this. It was, oh, I can just do that. I don't have a motor. So this is easy. But you can see the bed plate, it's all shot, it's all rusted. Somebody made a homemade ear cover here, so. This thing is gonna be, I would hardly call it a restoration, it's gonna be a total refinish. But you're gonna have to set guidelines for yourself. So, this one, got a good cabinet. This is how it came too, like a dark, a light on the bottom. Well, obviously, you're gonna have to refinish all the lacquers on here as well. This one, other than the fact that it's got a broken piece off the end here, which, yeah, I still have, it's got paint on it, and this is such a common problem. Even if it's not big globs like this, you usually find little flecks of paint on there because somebody painted the room in which they were with a roller, in which this phonograph was sitting, and there's all little specks. I can tell you how to get that off, and that's, but this, getting this off, this is something like Steve does. I can't do it. So I would have to refinish this or go to Steve. The rest of this machine, it's good for just what I would call, this is going to be a restoration. I'm not going to repaint it. I'm not going to refinish the case that much. And I had a machine like this, and it ends up like this in the end. So it's a lot of work. And I'll go through some of the process in getting to that. So if you're doing a machine like this, what's entailed in that is just cleaning it. And a lot of machines just need a really, really good cleaner. So here's the one that I used. Many of the people in the States and many of the other collectors use this. It's called Gojo. It's a hand wash for getting grease off your hands. It's the original formula. You can get it from Amazon. If you're in a hardware store in the States, you can just buy it down there in any hardware store. But be very careful. If you're gonna buy the Gojo, get the original formula. It's lanolin based. If you get the newer Gojo, what's available here in Canada, it's water-based. You know as well as I do, if you put water on any one of these finishes, it's all gonna go to a white haze. Some of the people who have more money than I do, they go after this one. It's called the New Life Furniture Mask. I've tried both of these products, and I find they both work the same. This one's quite expensive, where this is really, really inexpensive. It's easy to get.
Is that for cleaning the cabinet or the bed plate? Or
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, I would do all the cabinet, all the woodwork with this. This machine here, I would use the Gojo, everything. The black, the bed plate, all the wood. If I had little paint specks on it, when you apply the Gojo, it actually starts to soften all the lacquer underneath. So if you have a little dot of a paint speck, you can actually pick it off with your fingernail or the tip of a knife blade and, you know, rub it a little bit more and you'll get all the paint specks off. That one would be quite a bit. Sorry?
Let it soak?
You can let it soak. I wouldn't let it soak too long. I work with a very soft brush. I use a toothbrush or a vegetable brush that you get at Lee Valley for cleaning your vegetables. That's it. That would get most of it. If in the end you still wanted a little bit more gloss, you can go to a French polish after that, and you can apply it right over top of the Gojo once it's dried a little bit. So, what do I have to get to now? If you're going to refinish, which is in a case like this one, I use something called methyl hydrate. I do not use strippers. You don't need to use strippers. You get this at Canadian Tire. And the other thing you're gonna need is you're gonna need 4/0, very minimum, 3/0 steel wool. All you have to do is wipe this down, put it on the surface on here. I could put it on right now, and this would all start dissolving. Don't go to furniture strippers unless it's varnish or paint. You can get all of this off very, very easily and not stink up the whole house and not dry out all your hands. So just use this one. Oh yeah, if somebody, I've run into this before. If you pick up a machine that somebody has urethane, or you have a Victor and they have a urethane on it, I'm sorry, but circa 1850, it's probably the stripper you're gonna have to use. And circa 1850, Harold was telling me about that one. You have 4 different classifications, 4 different strengths. And it's a really good one because when you're done, it's done. You don't have to worry about chemical residues being left on it. So if you have to, and mostly it's because there's urethane. Stain. Okay, here's a really big one. Once I have it all stripped down, I would just use on Victor machines, which are golden oak, I use a golden oak Minwax stain. That's all you need to use. On Edison machines, I don't know, did I bring them? Yeah, I did. And always just buy the little jars because this stuff doesn't last forever. So this is it. You can buy these at Home Hardware, Canadian Tire. So special walnut for the Edison machines. This is all special walnut. That's the color. And I have to tell you, this was the same issue. This lid and this bottom were different colors. So that's why I had to strip it right down. I had to get it back with a stain. And the Minwax stain, it's easy, it's oil-based, really easy to work with. You put it on, you wipe it off. That's all you do. I always had trouble with mahogany, and I could never get a stain that worked for me. Maybe other people have found something. Please let me know.
I was going to ask you, because that's the problem I have.
So here's what happened. I went to a professional paint shop and explained to them my problem with mahogany record cabinets and machines that I was working on. And the guy there really understood, and he understood I was working with antiques. He said, okay, I'll mix you up a gallon, but it's gonna cost you $40. I still have 7/8 of that gallon. But he did it. It's amazing. And the other thing is, he called it walnut. Really? But it was the perfect mahogany stain, and I have used it over and over and over again. And all I can tell you about it is that I have 1 gallon. The bottom 2 inches is probably pigment. And when every time I use it, I have to stir for about a half an hour to get the pigment up off the bottom. And then when I put it on, I can't leave it to sit very long because it's just soaks right up. So that's how I did it. Yeah, I can recommend you go to a professional shop and get some, or you can come and get a small bit from me because I still got lots left. Shellac, here's the next part. So after you've got the stain on, you're gonna let it sit for 24 hours, give it some time to dry. Just before you put the shellac on, you're gonna use tack cloths. You can get these at Canadian Tire, Home Hardware, anywhere. This, to me, other than my toothpicks and my Q-tips, are the 3 most valuable tools on my workbench. I use this tack cloth for everything, and I use it all the time. As soon as I've got something sanded down, or if I wiped something down or cleaned it, and before I put on a coat of shellac, you gotta rub it down with a tack cloth and get everything off. For shellacs, I mix my own. And I really recommend that you learn how to mix your own shellacs. You can go to Lee Valley, you buy the shellac flakes, you buy the Lee Valley shellac thinner, and you just follow the formulas on the case and you make your own shellacs. You get the clear one, you get the amber or the orange ones, and you mix up the two. And you mix very, very small quantities. I use little jam jars because I don't want this stuff sitting around for 6 months or a year. Shellac actually will go bad after a while. The other thing is I can't stress enough that you use the Lee Valley lacquer thinner, because when you have dissolved that shellac flake, it is dissolved. You won't find 1 gram of shellac or any little crystal sitting on the bottom. It really is the perfect job. And when you apply it, it dries like almost within minutes. And so when you do your shellacking, I use a foam brush. Well, I don't know. Do I have to show you this? You must know what a foam brush looks like, but I brought it anyway. So that's a foam brush. When you're working with shellac, and this is gonna be something you're gonna have to learn. Shellac dries, especially the one from Lee Valley and the ones you make, it's going to dry by the time you go from here to here. So you have to figure out, how am I gonna do this? Because you can't go back over it. You apply it once or twice, and within seconds, your work time, it's over. So on a case something like this, you would go down, you would do all the edges, you would do the contours, and you would start here, you go over. Start here, and you go over. And you have to work fast, you have to work quick, and it just takes time for you to learn how quick this stuff works. Then I use 2 or 3 coats. Between every coat, I'm back to the 4/0 steel wool. I brush it all down, bring out my tack cloth, clean it all again, put another coat on. 2 minimum, 3 probably even more. That's the shellac. Oh, the mechanics. Oh, here I've got some bugaboos that I want to talk about here. People who say they're gonna leave their stuff original, come on, folks. Like, this grease is 100 years old. This one's actually pretty good. This one is, it's all corroded.
Something missing here, Lee.
So, you really, really have to clean these. So there's different techniques. There's people who take it all apart, and I agree with that. If you can put it back together, again, once it's taken to every little part, good for you. I can't. I disassemble down to small assemblies and small pieces and get as much apart as I can. And I use Varsol or paint thinners to clean. Other people use ultrasonic cleaner, which is water-based. I have a definite fear of water-based, and I don't want to go near anything that's water. So that's why I work with the Varsol. And if you can try and find the Varsol that doesn't stink, better yet. But the last store I was into didn't have it anymore. So that's what I use, and you get it all clean, you let it dry. And then here's one little bone that I have to pick with things I see on the internet. And I know for a fact, from my mechanical background, if you don't treat all these parts that you've cleaned, within 10, 50, 20 years from now, it'll all be rust again. You have to spray everything down with oil. So all these little parts, everything you take apart, spray it down with oil again. Just a light spray, let it dry. Come back the next day, if there's still too much oil there, wipe it down again. But you have to do that. I found too many machines that once people here know I go to Stanton's, and that's where I get a lot of my machines. So when I bring these back from the Stanton's auction, I open them up, and I find out rust. And that's terrible, because somebody went to the effort of cleaning it, restoring it all, but they didn't spray it down with oil. It's already rusty. We've talked a little bit about the rust. How do you remove it? Canadian Tire, my favorite go to church morning. That's my church, Sunday morning. I go to Canadian Tire. It's called Rust Check or Rust Wash. It's quite reasonable, easy priced. It's environmentally safe. There's no fumes. It's easy to work with. They now have one out, which when Steve and I were working on a horn, it's actually gel type. So I could actually put it on the inside of the horn, put a cloth over it so it didn't evaporate that quick, and cleaned up all the inside rust on the horn. And then Steve fixed up the flowers for me, but I got rid of the rust. So this is the product. I use it a lot. You can already see all these items here, all these screws, all the things, they're all gonna be covered with rust. So as soon as I get all the screws, all these little, I take them off right away. I soak them overnight in this, and it'll pretty much dissolve all your rust. Even my parts that are nickel plated, this right here where you have the mandrel, it's already got rust on it. This, by the way, would be a total refinish, so I would repaint. Yeah, I'd soak that. The rust would be gone. Then I'd nickel plate, but that's a whole other story there. But you have to get rid of the rust. Painting. I should have mentioned this. Did I get to that? So, yeah, I'll jump here. Painting. This bed plate here, Tremclad, Canadian Tire. Tremclad gloss black. That's what you gotta use. It's just a rattle can. I don't have a spray booth. My wife won't let me spray in the basement anymore. Fumes are too high. So I have to wait for the summer. In the winter time, I've actually contracted with a metal shop in Stratford, and I go in and use their spray booth at 5 o'clock at night. That's what you can do, but in the summer, you just go outside and do it, and shoo all the flies away so they don't land on it. I'll do complete horns, I'll do bed plates, I'll do all the little parts. It's just a learning experience, but I can't recommend this stuff enough. It's perfect. To me, it's a very, very close match. What Tim did in getting back to the original paint is beyond my skill set. I just admit, I can't do it. I'm having enough trouble learning how to just use a rattle can for spray paint. So, yeah.
Before you paint it,
Yeah.
you scrub it down with a methyl hydra? What do you do?
Oh, if I'm doing a horn or this bed plate, that's real simple. No, I might use a bar salt to clean and get the grease and try and get as much dirt off as possible. I use 2 sandpapers, and only these 2. For the first cut, it's 300 grit, which is fine. My second sanding is 600 grit, which is very fine. And between each sanding, the old tack cloth again. So that's my final sanding is 600 grit. It's not hard. I'm telling you, these paints, they come off pretty easy. You can sand down a whole horn, I don't know, a couple hours, Steve? Easy.
You're
Yeah.
independent, yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't, as long as, for me, I don't work around the decal. So, for me, I order all my decals from either Eduardo in Peru, he's on the internet, or I get them from Phono Decal, Greg Klein, down in Ohio. Cost a little bit more to get all my decals sent up from Peru. I like him for the Victor decals that I do. If I'm doing Edison, then I go with Greg Klein down at Phono Decal. And he puts everything in an envelope and it's $2 shipping, so. Can't beat that, yes, Steve?
The guy in Peru has Berliner decals?
Sorry?
The guy in Peru has Berliner decals though, Victor Berliners?
Yeah, that's Eduardo. He did those for me.
Oh, just for you?
Yeah.
Special order.
Yeah, I contacted him one day because I buy his Victor decals. He said, geez, it's really, really close. Do you think you could just change the little script there and call it Berliner. And he went, oh, no, I'll have to redo the whole thing. So he had a whole procedure where I had to take a picture on an exact dimension this much away, and I sent it to him, and he did it. So for the first year, I bought 6, and then he went online, and he's been selling them ever since. But there's one mistake in there, I'll tell you, because it comes back to me, and I have to verify that, yeah, that's the right one. If you're ever looking at that Berliner decal, the very top part of the circle should be a dot. I missed it. So, Eduardo missed it, and so you'll always know that it's not perfect, but close enough. But you should know those things. When you're out there looking, you go, geez, I wonder if it's a reproduction or is it the original? If there's no dot in the top part of the arc, that's the brand new decal. Oh, I gotta talk to you. Once I get everything clean and I boil it down, I start putting it back together. You'll see a lot of people talking about, wow, what oil, what grease, what am I supposed to use? You can go on these chat forums and you're going to hear about every type of grease and oil that you can think of. So I have one simple philosophy. If it's metal on metal, I go to an oil that these club members from another club would never put up with if they had sticky oil. I thought, oh, okay. So I was talking to them one day. They're the gun guys. They would not put up with any sticky oil, any residues. So when I'm doing anything that has metal on metal sliding, I use gun oil. That stuff is amazing. You put a drop on a sleeve somewhere in the governor, where the governor has to slide up and down. You put a drop of this governor oil on there, and it just disperses. It just disappears. Like a guy that owes you money, right? It's gone, but it's so smooth, it's so even. When I have to do the gears, I mean the gears for all the running mechanisms. Again, I talked to the auto mechanic guys. They use transmission oil. Why? Because it sticks to the gears. That's all I ever use. Canadian Tire again, gun oil, Canadian Tire. Transmission oil, Canadian Tire. It's a beautiful red color, smells nice, you'll like it. For the winding mechanism, now that's where you're gonna have some heavy problems, and that's the only place you use grease. That's my opinion, but that's the only place I use. And again, I go to Canadian Tire. All I want is low viscosity, means no friction, and low temperature. I don't want the high temperature. I don't want all the chemical additives. Just want a simple grease. And that's what you use for all the winding mechanism. And you can see it. I mean, you can hear the grinding when you're trying to push, and there's a lot of friction there. That's what I use for that. That's the only place I use it. In the spring, I do the same thing. And when I'm winding the spring, there's two rules of thought out there. Some people say, okay, you just get the whole spring inside. You put the slabs of grease on top and you close it up. And when you wind it up, it'll spread. I've never believed that, and I've never had that luck, sorry. So when I'm putting my spring in, I put one wind of the spring in, I reach up to my bottle of grease with a little paintbrush, and I wipe the inside of the spring. I put one more coil in, I wipe it again, and I do that repeatedly. You have to be strong, because you gotta hold the spring while you're putting that in there. It can be nerve-wracking if you have a really tough spring.
Yeah,
but
I did
that does it.
I did that sort of thing once. Oh, I'm not doing it again. It's like,
Yeah, we
it's
need.
like,
Where's Angela when we need him?
yeah, it's just like, it's
There's
just
Angela.
so
Good.
scary.
Yeah.
It's just really scary to
Yes.
take the spring out. And take it out is even more scary.
Yeah.
It's like if you take it out, you make one wrong move, you're in the hospital.
You're in the hospital. Yeah, make sure you have gloves on, full protective gear, glasses, or go to Angela. Angela's an expert at that. And I'll tell you about these experts. There's experts like Angelo. There's experts like Paul Baker. There's different experts around the world, and they all have their own little secrecies and their little niches and their little tricks that they do. So you have to develop that relationship, and you have to talk to those people. And you have to respect the right that these people, they do this for money. They do it in Paul Baker's and other people's bills. They do this for a living. So they can't obviously tell you every little thing. So please respect that. They might give you some little hints, but talk to them. And generally they'll give you some. One of the big things that's going around right now is Don Gaffel passed away lately, but he had told, Don Gaffel made wooden horns, all sorts of them, spear tip, beautiful, beautiful horn, but he never told anybody what he used for his glue. So he did tell somebody, and he said, after I die, then you can tell people. So that's out in the market now, and it starts circulating, and I've seen what's being said, and everybody, oh, this is the glue that Don Gaffel used to use. But again, when I looked at it and I saw it, and I went, this is like a 5-second epoxy for wood. I go, really? I don't have 5 seconds to put a wood horn together and hold it and hope that it's gonna glue. Mark's really good at using crazy glue for that, but I'm not. So, and I'm sure Don probably used it for special circumstances, but I doubt if it was the glue he used all the time. So, I'm off topic, sorry. Nickel plating, okay. If any of you are gonna get into nickel plating, did you have yours nickel plated? That's beautiful, that's beautiful. I go to a nickel plater for all my large parts down, it's called Cambridge Plating, down in Cambridge. You can go to him too, I can give you his address. He's $250 minimum charge, so you better go in there with $250 worth of parts that you want nickel plated. It's not that hard to do your own nickel plating. I have a small pickle jar with my solutions and stuff that I can buy from Caswell. The distributor is right up here in Palmerston, just north of me in Stratford. They ship mail out, so you can get everything mail order real quickly, and you can read a lot about it. Plating is not that hard. That's the easy part. The preparation that is just, it's just frustrating. You have to, if you're going to be replating a part, you have to get that part perfectly almost mirror finish. If it be a steel or brass, copper even better, you have to get it down to a smooth part. So plating is easy. If you want to go down that, don't worry about the chemicals. What you have to be worried about now is how you're going to buff, how you're going to do all the prep work to get that part back. When I'm plating, I'm doing little parts like little screw here, some of my screws, knobs. I'll do little parts. And yeah, I think I've covered everything. Sorry. Angelo?
Questions. Trim. Have you found a source for the trim, like for fireside?
For the, no. I go to my, Brad Hunt, he's a club member here. His real expertise is woodworking, and he'll help me with that. But to get the wood trim, you have to have all the cutters to do that. So I don't have that source.
And what about these special clips?
Oh yeah, Brian Tellier down at Phono Decal. He used to sell these. Ron Sitko was selling these little clips here, and the ones on the side of the cabinet. In fact, I was short one, and Sang had one that he'd ordered from
See,
the phonograph shop.
There's people on eBay that sell those, but the cost is ridiculous.
Oh yeah, the cost is ridiculous. I guess which is just wood glue. I am not done. Wood glue. when you're gluing, Don Gavell used this 5-second epoxy. I use a professional wood glue. You buy it at Lee Valley. I've used this. I've stuck 2 pieces of wood together, come back the next day and pull the wood apart. The wood breaks, not the glue. So you really got to use this. Polishing now. If you're going to polish some of your nickel plating, Canadian Tire. It's called Peak. It's, I don't know, $11, $12 a tube. It'll last forever. You can just go there, buy that. I use that a lot. Put it on with steel wool. 4/0 steel wool again. Take just a clean rag, brush it off. Oh, we've talked about this already. JB Weld. Steve was using this. Again, where do you buy it? Canadian Tire. I'm sorry. I have to work. I live way out in Stratford in the Tavistock area. You know, other than having Amazon or Canadian Tire, those are my 2 shops. So you buy that. And this, like Steve was saying, this stuff's incredible. It's really, really hard. If you're gluing together some metal parts, if this is broken up top, the reproducer carriage, I would pin it, drill holes, put 2 pins in, use JB Weld, put this back together. What else have I got? Oh yeah, this was mentioned as well. Rub and buff, Amazon. One little final comment about rub and buff. Don't search it on your wife's computer. She is going to get every porno site contacting her. That was the mistake I made. Get it on Amazon, okay? Just go to Amazon, do a search just on Amazon, but don't go on the internet and search for rub and buff.
Blake, you told me about this, and there's a certain color too, right?
Yeah,
The old one?
yeah. This is the old gold, antique gold finish. And this, I bought 2 tubes of this stuff because I had a whole golden arm that I had to replace for a Victor 3 or 4. I'm not sure. Anyways, this stuff, it's a wax base. You just put, literally, the directions are apply with your finger. Once it's dry, buff. So really, just like it says, rub and buff. And it's amazing stuff. It's really, really easy to work with. It's readily available. And I think, stripping. I forgot to mention this. Yeah, after rub and buffing, if you are stripping and you have to use it, Harold and I were talking about this yesterday. I get these. These are from your kitchen. They're for scouring pads. I especially like this one. It's stainless steel. It doesn't have sharp edges. You know, you can do like this and you won't feel a thing. This is amazing because when you're trying to take up all the paint and the goop and everything else that's associated with it, it just absorbs it. Squeeze it out, go back to your stripping. It's the most amazing product for working with stripping. I think I'm done, Mike. I'm sorry.
Thanks,
Go on.
There were a lot of products he talked about here and others talked about and mentioned company names. I'll be posting this video on our YouTube channel, so you can always go there and watch the part of the video that might interest you and hear the names of the products again.
Well, yeah. Right, well, Blaine, that was just fabulous. Thank you. Very, very practical, lots of products, got everything we want there. So thank you so much for doing that. Now, we're running very late, but we have one more presentation, Sasha. Sasha Goldman has restored his 45 RPM record changer. We see these quite often, and he's just going to tell us about what he did to restore that. So, I don't know where we
Do we have, Mark, do we have an extension? Yeah.
Oh, so can you plug that actually in?
Okay.
Here. Can you reach over here?
Perfect.
There's one right behind you.
Yeah, it's
Right
too
next
far
to
away.
Oh, yeah, there's one.
the wall.
I don't think it reached.
No, it doesn't, I looked at things.
I can supply an extension cord.
Oh, okay.
No, we don't trust it.
No, we're good, we're good.
Okay, very good.
So, about a year ago, I started restoring this. It's a 45 RPM record changer. So you can stack 10 records and they will consecutively play without you having to press anything. When I got it, the idler wheel the rubber was hardened and squished. The pad here wasn't sticking. There was some stiffness in the mechanism, and I also decided to change the needle from mono to stereo. So when I had to change the idler wheel, I could have bought one, but I decided, because the shipping would have been $500 more. I thought I could just make it. So it was basically like a larger wheel on the bottom with a small wheel on the top. The large wheel goes from the motor, and then the small wheel touches the plate there. I had to measure from pictures, measure the actual size of each wheel, and to calculate how big they have to be to get it to run at 45. And then I had to go to the lathe and lathe the pieces, and I just used O-rings. So I had to calculate the outside of that O-ring and then the sitting diameter of the O-ring. And it worked out first time. Then there was also a piece that holds there's like a little mechanism in here that like drops the record, and there's like a axle that goes all the way down here with a piece that like stops while the table's spinning. That wasn't there, and I had to make that and measure it and calculate how big each piece needs to be to stop the mechanism inside and then drop it at the right time. There wasn't too much electronic repair other than the needle. It came with a mono sapphire needle, and because there's also a muting switch for when it switches over, I had to make that mute stereo as opposed to just mono. So that had to work out a little bit. But I didn't bring a amplifier right now, but we can see the mechanism work now.
How many records can you put on there?
You can put 10.
45?
Yeah. At like the 10th one, it kind of sometimes skips.
And it doesn't shut off at the end of the record? The last record will just play over and over. It's a cost-cutting feature of it. Sasha, do you want to put 2 records on to show how
Yeah.
quick one drops the other?
There's this little button that starts it. Yeah.
That's before AI.
Yeah. Yeah, the mechanism was really interesting to see how they actually got to work out exactly when it would move over and lift up and drop, and it's all very quick, so it's pretty interesting. And one more fun fact is that when my grandmother got her first summer job, it was at RCA in Montreal, exactly where this was built.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well done, Sasha, that was great, thank you very much. Something completely different. That's a really slick little machine, isn't it? And I used to have a Dansette record changer that was sort of clunky, but that seems, that is an earlier machine and it seemed to work much better. Anyway, we have run way over time today, but I hope you didn't mind, because if you found that anywhere near as enthralling as I did and as useful and practical as I did, then it was time well spent. So I apologise for the long wait for your coffee and donut, but I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and thank you to all of you who took the trouble to bring your machines in and to talk to us about them. Just fabulous job. Okay. I think we're probably going to have a fairly short break because we have a long auction.